right, so we're back. Back in the 1950s through 1980s, probably, there was this window of time when catharsis was considered to be a really productive way of handling anger. Catharsis is when you displace your anger intentionally. So, when I was in college back in the dark ages of the 1980s, there were these cathartic pillows you could buy, which is hilarious because they were just pillows. But they were sold. Man, that was the era when we were buying pet rocks, all sorts of other junk that were literally just household items, and we would buy them and go, "Now it's my pet." Anyway, so you were supposed to, with your cathartic pillow, bury your face in the pillow and scream to get your anger out. Get all those, stress related hormones from the anger out through this cathartic scream. They had, actually, they called that the primal scream therapy, where you would sit in a group session of other people who were dealing with anger and hostility, and everybody would scream in this group session. It sounds like a nightmare to me to be surrounded by a bunch of people who are screaming. There were like pillows to punch, and there were all sorts of different things that people thought would be a good way to displace your anger. Here's one from very recently, within the past year. New York City put up these public punching bags, and they were put up to give New Yorkers a way to vent their anger about, I don't know, like public works projects that were inconveniencing them or something. They were encouraging the population to punch, right? It's called a catharsis. I have this urge to punch someone. Here, I'll take it out on this inanimate object. It might be temporarily calming because, when you punch the bag, it makes you feel better for a second. It like takes that anger and it puts it all into the one place. And maybe now your hand hurts and you're like, okay, I actually don't feel as angry anymore because now I'm kind of in pain. But it doesn't reduce the anger over the long term. And that's the thing about catharsis. It doesn't take the anger away. The principle of cathartic procedures was that you would take that sympathetic nervous system energy, which is not how Freud referred to it. He just said, all of this psychic energy is what he called it, that was directed at whatever the source of your anger was. And even if you displace it onto something else, so maybe you're really mad at your boss, but you can't punch him because you need to work here. So you go out onto the public street and punch the public punching bag. Your system, according to Freud, doesn't know that you didn't disseminate all of that psychic energy onto the original target. As long as it got to disseminate, you're going to feel better. So Freud really recommended this kind of catharsis, right? Like you have to go through the pain. It doesn't matter if you're going through the pain with the original object or not. And actually that's the underlying principle of psychoanalytic theory, is that, you probably have unresolved conflicts and issues from childhood that you absolutely can't work out with the original target. And so your job is to work it out with the therapist. If there was no such thing as catharsis, psychoanalytic theory wouldn't work. That therapy wouldn't work at all. So that was the premise. And so a lot of people thought it made sense. I'll get rid of my anger by taking a kickboxing class, or I'll get rid of my anger by, a lot of people at the beginning of the internet, when there were all these public posting boards back in the olden days, that was like one of the first things that ever happened on the internet, was these public discussion boards where people could get on and they could say things, and they were anonymous people. You didn't know who it was. So that anonymity almost instantly turned into sexual for one thing, and then, mean for the other thing, right? Like immediately in the 1990s, you got into a discussion board, you were either going to be hit on or picked on. Like these were the two postures that were possible. So you would think that because people get on the internet and say mean things to people who they don't know, that maybe it would be cathartic And so in their real relationships, they would be able to be less hostile, right? Because they got all of that hostility out somewhere, and now they don't have to displace it on or place it onto their actual family members or whatever. It turns out it just doesn't work like that. That's not how anger works. It turns out that by expressing your anger, it actually makes you more angry. So for a moment after punching the public punching bag, you might feel less angry. You might need to punch it twice tomorrow to feel the same amount of relief that you felt today by punching it once. And then on the next day, you might have to do it 3 times, right? The more you let the anger out, the more it sort of rebuilds. It can become a habit. So now you go from punching the public punching bag to punching a hole in the wall of your apartment to punching somebody in the face. You might escalate searching for the same feeling of relief that you originally got when you punched the public punching bag for the first time. And that's the problem, right? Is that what's really happening is that you're not disseminating your hostility and your anger and putting it onto another target. What's happening is that you are engaging in a behavior that is giving you a reinforcement, a feeling of relief after you engage in that behavior. And then from then on, you are going to be chasing that reinforcement, that feeling of relief that you got. And it may have to escalate for you to continue to feel that degree of relief. So I don't know any modern theorists who still think catharsis is a good strategy. Now I want to do something that I didn't really prepare on my PowerPoints, but I'm going to throw in here really quickly because I used the word a second ago. And that's venting. Venting is not the same as what I'm talking about here. Venting would fall under a category of a positive way of dealing with, anger-inducing situations. That's working through it. It's not lashing out. Venting is, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but because I used the word while I was talking on this slide, I thought I want to make sure. And I think a lot of people actually use those two words interchangeably, catharsis and venting, and they're not the same thing. So this is catharsis, where I think that if I punch something, it'll get all of my hostility to go away, and it doesn't. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some gender differences. Just a tiny thing, a couple things I want to say. Boys, as I mentioned before, they have a tendency to fight or flee with the objects of their ire. So here we have a little boy who's slapping at his caregiver. Here we have an adult boy who's fleeing from whatever is making the emotional upset go on. Like, a really angry male might say, I need to go take a walk, a lot more likely than an angry female might say, right? Girls tend and befriend. And so as little girls, when they're upset or angry, they tend to want to be around their friends. In fact, one of the things that little girls do differently than little boys do is when they do get angry, they don't lash out and hit their friends, but they say things like, you can't be my friend anymore, right? Like I'm going to withdraw my befriending tendencies from you because you make me feel mad, you make me feel upset. And so I don't want to befriend you anymore. And so that's one of the ways that women also display anger towards their friends is they unfriend them, they ghost them, they don't want to be, and then they maybe try and marginalize them among their other friends. Susie said this about me and did this, and I'm really mad, and I don't think you should be friends with her anymore either. like that's a pretty common way that girls express their aggression, is to try and sort of socially marginalize the object of their ire. As adults, women are more likely than men to feel less angry when they are with their children. Of course, children can drive us crazy, so I don't mean to act like, oh, thank goodness I have the kids so I don't have to feel angry. I don't mean like that. But when angry at some other topic, women are more likely to want to hold the kids or want to make them dinner or things like that, because they're like, at least this part of my life is going well. Let me tend to it. Let me tend, the people that I love or care about, things like that. And then, of course, women who don't have children, they may turn to their friends and try and tend to them. Oh, I heard that you had, your wisdom teeth removed. Let me bring you some, a gift bag. And that makes me feel less angry about the thing I was angry at, because I'm tending to my friend who needs, care. And so these are like a little bit of sex differences that we see between males and females. And we see it from the time that they're very young and typically throughout the lifespan. As is the case with everything, when we see group differences, we can't speak to any individual within those groups, right? So you may meet a male who does a lot of tending and befriending, and a female who does a lot of fighting and fleeing, right? So it's not a guarantee. I'm just saying, on average, for groups, we see these differences. All right. So this is a good time to transition into something that females oftentimes do when they need to express their anger. Almost all females who I know, myself included, when they have to have a conversation with someone about their feelings, about their, like, to be assertive, right? To stand up for themselves. They should be feeling angry, but you may see them have a slightly different response than they would like to be having, and then maybe the person receiving it would want to have. They would like to maybe they'd rather see just pure anger. So I'm going to go ahead and let you flow into this little friends clip, and I'll see you on the other side.